It's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. These are our top stories this morning. Wayne Couzens, the police officer charged with the kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard, is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court this morning. Discussions continue over whether a vigil planned in Sarah's memory can go ahead after officers confirm a body found in Woodland in Kent is that of the 33-year-old.
I didn't want to leave my room at night. I felt that this person was a predator.
Moved to speak out. The woman whose attacker went on to kill tells us why women feel let down by the criminal justice system. The City of Minneapolis pays a $27 million settlement to the family of George Floyd over his killing in police custody, but campaigners say a criminal conviction is needed. Lost at sea, the family's raising money to try to find 3 fishermen who went missing more than 6 weeks ago.
It's just horrible waiting, and you're longing for it. You're just longing for him to say, look, we found them.
Breeding the perfect pup. We'll hear from the researchers trying to understand what makes the best possible guide dog. In the sport, Lee Westwood shows the youngsters how to do it as Rory McIlroy misses the cut at golf's Players' Championship.
And we've seen some very wet weather crossing the country overnight. It's giving way to showers, but it's still quite a blustery and rather cool picture. Things do start to improve into next week. We'll look at the weather a little later on.
And at 7:45, we'll take a look at the newspapers with comedian Andrew Doyle and journalist and broadcaster Vidisha. Good morning. Welcome to Sky News Breakfast. Wayne Couzens, a serving member of the Metropolitan Police Service, is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court this morning, charged with the kidnap and murder of Sarah Everard. Miss Everard, who was 33, disappeared while walking home from a friend's house in South London last week. Yesterday, officers investigating the case confirmed a body found in Woodland in Kent is hers. The events have led to an outpouring of anger about women's safety on Britain's streets. Organisers of a vigil for Miss Everard in London say they're continuing talks with the Metropolitan Police to work out if the event can go ahead this evening. Home Affairs correspondent Mark White reports.
On London's Clapham Common last night, the Met Police Commissioner visited the area where Sarah Everard was last seen. Cressida Dick reassuring an understandably anxious public that there will be extra police patrols here in the days ahead. This is a few miles away at Scotland Yard. Her Assistant Commissioner confirmed the main suspect in Sarah's alleged abduction and murder had been charged. That man, PC Wayne Couzens, a serving armed police officer with the Met's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Command. The news of the criminal charges was relayed to the family of Sarah Everard by the same specialist officers who just hours earlier had confirmed that the human remains found in woods near Ashford in Kent were those of Sarah. At the suspect's house in the Kent town of Deal, forensics teams are still conducting a detailed examination of his property. Groups of others have been involved in fingertip searches of land near the house and around a garage in Dover, the suspect's former family business. The sense of profound shock and wider debate over women's safety has triggered a number of protests and vigils. The Prime Minister said he shared that sense of outrage.
I can see, and I totally understand, why this has triggered such a wave of feeling on this issue, on the issue of safety of women and safety of the streets. And I want to echo very much what Priti Patel said, which is that no woman should walk our streets in fear. Every woman should feel able to walk our streets in safety.
Wayne Couzens is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court today. As Scotland Yard confirmed, he was taken to hospital for a second time in as many days after he sustained another head injury in his police cell. He's now back in police custody. Mark White, Sky News.
Organisers of a vigil planned in London this evening in memory of Sarah Everard say they're continuing discussions with the Met Police about whether the event can go ahead. The Reclaim These Streets event on Clapham Common was thrown into doubt after Scotland Yard warned the gathering would breach coronavirus regulations. The organisers mounted an appeal at the High Court, but the judge refused to intervene. Similar events were set to take place across the UK at 6 p.m. tonight, but some have been cancelled in light of the police stance, while others are moving online. Sarah Everard's death has prompted many women to speak out against the harassment they've suffered. But from unwanted touching to domestic violence and rape, very few crimes committed against women end in a conviction. A victim of the man who went on to murder the student Libby Squires has described for the very first time how she felt failed by the police. She spoke to Katerina Vitozzi. Her warning her story includes details of sexual crimes that some people may find upsetting.
She's never spoken publicly about this before. But in 2017, as a student, this young woman was in her ground floor bedroom and saw a man pressed up against her window looking in.
Our first thought was maybe it would have been an opportunistic sort of burglar. Maybe he'd spotted the keys. But when my housemate came back from work at a local bar around 4 a.m, she found a used condom and stained pair of women's knickers on the door handle. It was only really sort of afterwards that the sort of fear really set in. I felt that this person was a predator. But, you know, at that time it was just a hunch, you know. Even my own friends and family thought I was overreacting.
At first, she says she felt the police didn't take her report seriously, and yet the perpetrator was later identified as Pavel Relevich. By then, he'd raped and killed 21-year-old student Libby Squire in a random attack as she was coming home from a night out.
This man had not only, you know, violated a number of young women in the area, but then gone on to do something, you know, just unimaginably horrific.
Humberside Police's internal inquiry into their handling of the Pavel Relevich investigation found that the force did the best they could with the information they had at the time. But campaigners say women across the country are being let down, especially when it comes to gender-based violence and sexual offences.
The figures show the prevalence of sexual assault hasn't changed significantly in a decade. More women are victims. They are 4 times more likely than men to have experienced sexual assault. Most common is unwanted touching, followed by indecent exposure. But fewer than 1 in 5 victims of rape or assault by penetration reported their experience to police, with embarrassment the most common reason for non-reporting, followed by thinking the police couldn't help. The police are working to try and change this, but for some victims of gender-based crime, it's already too late. Marie McCourt's daughter, Helen, was 22 when she was abducted and murdered just minutes from home.
When it's murder, we don't know what damage they did to our children. We don't know how much pain they were in when their life was taken. It's like if somebody comes and punches a hole in your heart.
Campaigners want better legislation against minor sexual or harassment offences to stop perpetrators progressing to something potentially worse. Until then, they say victims are bearing the burden.
I wish I could have stopped him. Like, you know, I wish I could have known in that moment and gone bolting down that street, and not that I could have done anything. But
Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News.
weird things that cross your mind.
The US City of Minneapolis has agreed to pay the family of George Floyd $27 million to settle a civil lawsuit. Mr. Floyd was killed last year after a police officer pressed his knee against his neck for nearly 9 minutes, sparking worldwide protests. The civil dispute is separate from the ongoing criminal trial, where police officer Derek Chauvin is charged with 3rd and 2nd-degree murder, as well as manslaughter. Sally Lockwood reports.
George Floyd's death sparked protest around the world. But 10 months on, the anger has turned to apprehension. Will change and justice come? As the criminal trial begins, the civil lawsuit concludes with a record payout from the City of Minneapolis to the Floyd family.
The settlement is not just historic because of the $27 million paid out, but for the impact on social justice, policy reforms, and police reforms.
The next chapter in their fight for justice is here. Former officer Derek Chauvin is on trial for murder in the fortified courthouse. But there's a deep mistrust among some, not just for police, but for the system. Already critical the jury's selection is too white, and concerned a payout isn't justice without a conviction.
So it really is a significant settlement, and it's a significant indictment of the way that police have treated African-American people in this country for a very long time. So for that standpoint, it's significant. But beyond that, we really do have to have a conviction in the case of Derek Chauvin. We really need that, because otherwise, the only people who will have had a consequence for this killing will be George Floyd himself and the taxpayers.
How confident are you that you will get that conviction?
Frankly, I'm concerned.
Exactly a year on, the family of Breonna Taylor still don't feel they have justice. Shot dead in a flawed police raid of her home in Louisville, her family received a payout, but no accountability for her killing. Their deaths may have been a reckoning for racial inequity, but for many, only a conviction will feel like change. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, New York.
The Prime Minister is backing a national day of reflection to mark the anniversary of the first coronavirus lockdown on the 23rd of March. The charity Marie Curie is planning the day to remember those who died during the pandemic. It marks a year to the day when Boris Johnson first told UK residents they must stay at home in an effort to limit the spread of COVID-19. There'll be a minute's silence at 12 o'clock to remember the people who died during the pandemic, and people are being encouraged to stand on their doorsteps at 8 p.m. with phones, candles and torches to signify a beacon of remembrance. From today, coronavirus restrictions in Wales are beginning to ease. Up to 4 people from 2 households are allowed to meet outside, including in private gardens. Outdoor sports facilities are also allowed to reopen, and indoor care home visits by a single designated visitor are permitted once again. From Monday, primary school children can return to the classroom, along with students who are completing their qualifications this year. Hairdressers and barbers will also be allowed to take appointments from Monday. Let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 figures now, and another 6,609 new coronavirus cases have been reported in the latest 24-hour period, along with 175 more deaths within 28 days of a positive test. That takes the total number of people who've died to 125,343. 23.3 million first doses of a vaccine have now been given as the rollout and lockdown measures continue to reduce infection levels. The 25th anniversary of the Dunblane massacre will be marked quietly and in private today. 16 school children and a teacher were killed in 1996 when a gunman opened fire during a PE lesson in the town's primary school. It led the UK to introduce some of the world's strictest controls on firearms. Well, Professor Peter Squires, who's a professor in criminology and public policy at the University of Brighton, joins us now. Good morning to you. It's a tragic anniversary at 25 years on. People still remember vividly, isn't it?
Absolutely. It was an outrageous event and national sense of being appalled by the fact that children could be killed by what were licensed weapons, that someone had authorized this weapon ownership. And so the process of reform focused upon the handguns themselves, and in very quick time they were prohibited.
Yes, I mean, it prompted an almost total ban on the private ownership of handguns. As you say, an immediate response, unprecedented.
Absolutely, yes. Dunblane was not our first mass shooting. There had been Hungerford 9 years earlier. And very little was really done to address the misused firearms. So there was no there was no saying this is an outrageous event. This is a knee-jerk reaction. There was an immediate demand. The Snowdrop campaign was very effective in mobilising opinion, and although the government established a judicial inquiry, its compromise proposals were very quickly swept away, and John Major's government banned one set of high-caliber guns, and then Tony Blair. It was the election in 1997. Tony Blair came in and New Labour banned all guns, including .22 caliber.
And in terms of Europe, in other countries in Europe with mass shootings, the response to a change in laws, we perhaps haven't seen it elsewhere. There have been studies suggesting that though these incidents occur, that the change in laws doesn't come about that swiftly.
Not necessarily. A policy scientist, Stefan Herker, working in Austria, did some work looking at what the factors were that led to change. As you say, some mass shootings lead to rapid change, others don't at all. And it has to do, I think, with the balance of forces. In some places, where there is widespread participation in shooting and a strong gun lobby and maybe lack of interest at the sort of senior political levels, nothing happens. But when there is a groundswell of opinion, as in Dunblane, when it connects with a political party, particularly when there's an election coming up and the firearms become an election issue, then there's potential momentum. But it doesn't always happen.
And in this country, perhaps different to countries like America, for instance, just how easy is it to get hold of firearms now?
In this country, very hard. But the banning of handguns is not a quick fix. You don't have to be a criminologist to realise that passing a law doesn't make crime go away. So we began to see a whole new set of converted guns, reactivated guns, antique guns being recycled criminally and finding their way into gang-affected communities. So passing a law doesn't change anything necessarily, because guns and criminals will often find a way. And as much as anything, it's about being continually vigilant in ensuring that there's no slippage or complacency, that the licensing system remains robust, that our borders are protected against gun trafficking, and new types of guns, perhaps coming through the internet, delivered by fast parcel service, which means they can hardly all be scanned. We block all the other loopholes up to make sure that public safety is preserved.
Professor Peter Squires, they're reminding us that we still need to be vigilant. Thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. Time now for a look at the weather with Joe. What's it looking like?
It's looking better than it would have looked overnight, if it had been light at the time, obviously. You know, we had quite a lot of heavy rain overnight, an area of low pressure, and that's now cleared away into the North Sea. So it is an improvement. You may not think it's much of one. Into next week, things look a little more calm and settled. Let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, this is the culprit, this area of low pressure here, now pushing its way away into the North Sea. But as these areas of low pressure do, they're leaving us in this very showery regime. And if you catch one of these, it could be quite heavy, quite squally. There could be the odd bit of hail, the odd rumble of thunder. And certainly over northern parts of England, central southern parts of Scotland, these could still be wintry up over the high ground. However, the fact that we've got these strong, blustery northwesterly winds, it does mean that those showers will move through quite quickly where you do find one. And certainly through this afternoon, central, southern, southeastern areas should dry up. Now, it's not going to be warm by any stretch, 9 or 10 degrees Celsius at best. That's 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And, of course, feeling colder in the winds as well. And those values still lower further north. But some brightness will be quite pleasant. We see some further showers pushing their way southeastwards overnight, but it's largely dry to start off with on Sunday morning. Possibly a touch of frost down in the southeast. Certainly some brightness in the morning before we see some further rain coming in from the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Jackie up next. Good morning.
Good morning. The battle for Premier League survival is getting tighter by the week. Newcastle needed a last gasp equaliser to rescue what could prove to be a crucial point last night. Lee Westwood is proving age doesn't stop you being a front runner at the Players' Championship. We're going to show you how he's succeeding where Rory McIlroy is not just now. And Jofra Archer is the star man as England's cricketers get back to winning ways in India.
I'm Diana Magny and I'm Sky's Russia correspondent, based here in Moscow. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
More flares going off, a volley of rocks, cobbles have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. We have now left Italy and entered France. Nobody's asked to check our identity. Made by people who dare to challenge.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why?
Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
It's devastating, actually.
Just some breaking news to bring you in regards to that vigil planned for tonight in memory of Sarah Everard. There's been a tweet from Reclaim the Streets, which they say they're sorry to confirm that the Clapham vigil scheduled for tonight is cancelled. They released a statement in which they've said they've been in discussions with the Metropolitan Police since day one of planning the vigil, and following yesterday's hearing, they continued those discussions and repeatedly tried to find a way forward for the event. At our meeting yesterday evening, we made many suggestions, including staggering start times, splitting the event into time slots and several other ideas to accommodate police concerns, as well as asking the police for their own suggestions. We've made every effort to reach a positive outcome that applies proportionality so that we could find an appropriate balance between our right as women to freedom of assembly and expression with the regulations set out in COVID regulations. We've been very disappointed that, given the many opportunities to engage with organisers constructively, the Metropolitan Police have been unwilling to commit to anything. While we have had positive discussions with the Lambeth officers present, those from Scotland Yard would not engage with our suggestions to help ensure that a legal COVID-secure vigil could take place. It remains our view that With the appropriate mutually agreed measures in place, this evening's vigil on Clapham Common would have been safe and in line with restrictions and safety regulations. However, in light of the lack of constructive engagement from the Metropolitan Police, we do not feel that we can, in good faith, allow tonight's event to go ahead. So that breaking news that the vigil planned for Clapham Common has been cancelled.
Well, if you were sleeping and you're wondering what happened to the Players' Championship last night, their 5th major, we can tell you. And it's one of the old names who's at the top of the leaderboard. Let's have a look.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality, committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
Is this the future? With its rush of air, crunch of gravel and electric wine, Extreme E sounds and looks like nothing else, and is progressive enough and competitive enough to hook Jenson Button as a team owner. Button, who not so long ago seemed an electric skeptic.
If I'd said to you 5 years ago you'd be racing in an electric series, would you have laughed at me?
Look at it, it's so cool, it's so exciting. You know, this is an electric vehicle that has 550 horsepower. Initially we ran at 60% power. I was thinking, it's not very quick. And then we turned up to 100 and wow.
The series' 5 rounds will be held at global sites relevant to climate change, from oil-rich Saudi Arabia to a worryingly ever-greener Greenland. But to maximise the messaging on global warming, must the racing be red hot, and, like the eco-science content running in tandem, easy to follow.
The format's going to be really short races. You know, our attention span these days is not great. I mean, we're doing an interview here and neither of us are on our phones, which is unusual. We're going to be racing in places around the world that no one's really ever put a foot down on the sand or on the dirt. So for us, it's an amazing experience.
Extreme E enjoys relevance to the growing electric road car market, but unlike Formula E, a series Button declined to join, avoids unfavourable comparisons with F1. Perhaps as a result, it's attracted 3 F1 world champion owners, with Nico Rosberg and Button's fellow Briton Sir Lewis Hamilton also signed up.
Well, Sebastian Loeb is in Lewis Hamilton's car, so I think Lewis's team is pretty strong, and Nico Rosberg has a team as well. So it's F1 world champions reuniting.
In terms of its purpose, format and presentation, Extreme E is different. Will it create a buzz? Craig Slater, Sky Sports.
I'm in.
I'm in.
I'm in.
We're all in to kick it out.
Partnering to end racism in sport.
I'm Errol McKellar, and I've been a football youth coach and mentor for over 40 years. We're at the training ground for the Leighton Orient youth team. I've been very privileged to work with some really, really fantastic footballers, the likes of Sol Campbell, Ashley Cole, Ledley King. But when they're passionate and they're good at what they're doing, your job is not that difficult. All you've got to do is keep enhancing and working with their dreams. If we don't make them become footballers, we make them become better people.
Trust these guys, they will get you.
Thank you, guys. I wasn't always a football coach. I started off as a mechanic. That was my day-to-day job. You know, everything was fine until I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I found out about prostate cancer purely by accident. When my wife Sharon was complaining about me snoring, I went to the doctor. I picked up a leaflet from Prostate Cancer UK, and the young lady said, "You don't need to make an appointment. This is a simple blood test that takes less than 10 minutes. I get a phone call. Could I come in and have a biopsy done? Moving on from that, I had a scan. The doctor said, "Mr. McKellar, your prostate is covered in cancer. If we don't remove your prostate, you could be dead in 6 months." And I remember sitting in my car, I just burst into tears because I didn't know what to do next. And my wife came in the car and she said, look, in all the years that I've been with you, I've never seen you quit on anything that you've ever done. She said, this cancer has only knocked you down. It hasn't knocked you out. And I took that as an inspiration. So I had the operation to remove the prostate. I had to have nearly 3 months of radiotherapy to get rid of the rest of the cancer. The first day I went back into my garage, a gentleman came in to have some work done on his car. And I said, when was the last time you had your prostate checked? And he said, what the bleep, bleep, bleep has that got to do with my gearbox not working? And I said to him, listen, I'll give you a 20% discount on the work I'm going to do on your car if you go and get your prostate checked. 2 weeks later, he came back. He had a 25% cancer in his prostate. He said to me, look, don't worry about the money. More importantly, I think you need to start raising the awareness of this issue, right? Because I wouldn't have gone and done this check had you not said it. And he was the first of 48 guys that walked into my garage, no different to this, that was diagnosed with prostate cancer. 1 in 8 men suffer prostate cancer. More frighteningly, 1 in 4 Afro-Caribbean men suffer prostate cancer. Even in these difficult times, we still have to be vigilant. You bring your car in here for me to MOT it every year. Why are you not looking at your body in the same way?
Committed to getting 100 million people 20% more active by 2025.
It's 7:31. You're watching Sky News at Breakfast. Coming up, more than 1 million people in the UK have taken part in research into COVID-19. We'll be speaking to a professor in critical care about what this means. Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Now, more than 1 million people have now taken part in COVID research across the UK. To mark the milestone, Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty and NHS England Chief Executive Sir Simon Stevens have released a series of videos thanking all participants for their efforts.
Every single person has helped contribute to this who's taken part as a volunteer, and that's allowed us to develop new treatments, to understand the disease better and to develop vaccines.
So a huge thank you goes to everybody, the clinical researchers, the research nurses, the entire team across hospitals, GP practices, the NHS, who have made this possible.
Well, Chair in Anaesthesia and Critical Care at Imperial College, Professor Anthony Gordon joins me now. Good morning to you. Would it be fair to say that the UK has led the clinical research into COVID-19?
I think it has. This figure now of more than 1 million participants in various researches related to COVID in the UK is a phenomenal figure, and I think is world leading, and it shows just how the UK, the NHS and the National Institute for Health Research in the UK have worked together to really tackle this new disease and provide us answers.
Can you tell us specifically about the research that's been undertaken and what it's taught us, what we've learned from it?
Well, there's a variety of research. Maybe if I start with what we've been doing in intensive care, the REMAP-CAP trial has been looking at treatments to help the sickest patients, to help them get off breathing machines, recover. And we've seen these drugs such as tocilizumab, saralimab, the rheumatoid arthritis drugs that have helped there, tackling the inflammation that this virus causes. But the research also includes the research into the vaccines that have been rolled out and is now, as we know, so many millions of people being treated, that hopefully is leading to the end of lockdown. But also just to understand the virus. This is going to be with us, I think, now forever. And we need to understand it. It's something none of us had ever seen before. And now we understand so much more, so that hopefully we can still develop new treatments over time.
So the focus now on how to live with COVID-19, as you say, it's something that is going to be here forever, potentially.
Yes, but it needs to be something that then we can live with, that we can manage, that it's still, at the moment, despite these advances, still a nasty disease for some people when they become ill and come into hospital. So we shouldn't think things are over, and there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think if you think back to where we were a year ago, when none of us knew anything about this disease, and actually there was very little we could do for people in the hospital. We were able to support them and just hope that they got better, that their own body would fight the virus, get better. But now we've got these treatments, and I think patients are doing better. We have more hope, and I think we can get back soon to a more normal life.
For the volunteers that have taken part, can you explain a little bit exactly what they had to undergo to be part of the research, potentially for anyone who wants to be involved?
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing, that these are 1 million people who volunteered to take part in research. They've will normally have been talked to about the study, explained what's involved, and agreed to take part, and they've shared their information about themselves. They may have had blood samples taken so that we understand about the disease, and they will have also been, those who've had treatments will have been put into groups. Some patients have got one type of drug, some have got none, some have got combinations. And by following these patients, they take part in the research over time, we can learn which drugs worked and which ones didn't.
Can you tell us how people can get involved should they wish to?
There's lots of ways. They will often be contacted by different teams, whether it be through your general practice, whether it's in the hospital when you're approached by one of our research nurses, for instance, they may speak to you. And I would encourage people to listen to what's available and consider it, and hopefully take part and agree to use the information about you so that we can all learn, and this can help patients in the future.
Yes, indeed, and we thank those that have taken part so far. Professor Anthony Gordon, thank you for speaking to us.
Welcome.
3 fishermen set out from North Wales just over 6 weeks ago and have not been heard from since. A life raft from their boat washed up in Scotland last week, and now their families are raising money for an expert to try to find them. Sadia Chowdhury has been to meet families in Conway, North Wales.
Endless questions for the families of 3 fishermen who never came home. Carl McGrath, Ross Ballantyne and Alan Minard were on a fishing trip in late January. What happened to them and why they never returned is still a mystery.
He actually built the boat and he worked hard day and night.
Carl's mother Julie is desperate for answers.
You just sat there day in, day out, waiting for some news, and it's horrible. It's just horrible waiting, and you're longing for it. You're just longing for him to say, look, we found them. And that's what I'm longing for, you know, to get that so we can put, you know, we want to put Carl at peace. We want to lay him to rest.
The families of all 3 have sought help from the ocean recovery expert who found wreckage of the plane carrying footballer Emiliano Sala. They're hoping to raise £75,000 to pay for the private search.
We know time's against us, so we decided to raise the money for this private search with David Mearns, who's been advising us along the way. So we started that off 2 weeks ago. We're currently up to 40,000 just over, which is absolutely incredible.
The families say they can't start grieving until their boys come home.
This is Conway Quay in North Wales, and it's from here that Ross, Carl and Alan set sail on board a boat that Carl built with his own hands. The weather conditions that day were described as moderate, a perfect day for sailing.
This video is from the boat's maiden voyage. The Nicola Faith, a 33-foot vessel, sailed what's believed to be its final journey on January 27th. Its GPS last located it at 6 p.m. that evening. The men were last seen at 10 p.m. by a friend sailing in the opposite direction east of Conway in Liverpool Bay. Carl waved to him and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The alarm was raised the following morning after the boat failed to return. A search covering hundreds of square miles off the North Wales coast was eventually called off. Then last week, the boat's life raft was found 90 nautical miles from here, in Scotland. None of the raft's equipment had been used. The families say life is in limbo as they wait for answers. The private search is set to begin next week. Their search for closure depends on it. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in North Wales.
Guide dogs provide an invaluable service for people with disabilities, but could they make an even bigger difference? Well, researchers are undertaking a genetic study to try to find out how to breed the best possible guide dog, examining thousands of Labrador Golden Retriever pups in the process. Scientists will take swabs from the dogs to sequence their DNA in the most in-depth study of canine genes of its kind, with the aim of getting a better picture of the link between genetics, health and behaviour. Let's take a look at the weather now with Joe.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, it's been a very blustery night, a lot of rain, but much of that has cleared away now. You might not think it because we've got showers to follow, and some of these could be quite heavy and squally. There may be some hail, the odd rumble of thunder too. Could even be wintry over the high ground of northern England and central southern Scotland. Through the course of the day, then, those showers continue to pour in from the northwest. The good news is the winds will be strong enough to blow them through quite quickly. And certainly through the afternoon, there's a good chance that central, southern, southeastern areas will dry up quite nicely, but it will be breezy and it won't be that warm. Top temperatures only around 10 or 11 degrees Celsius. That's 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Further showers move through overnight, but for many it's going to be a dry night, a long clear spell, so a chilly start to Sunday morning and further rain coming from the west later.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News at Breakfast. Still to come, We'll take you through the morning's newspapers with the comedian Andrew Doyle and the journalist and broadcaster Vidisha.
I want Spain to roll out a coronavirus vaccine passport as soon as possible in order to restore tourism and transport, obviously. This is absolutely crucial for the tourism sector and its industry. However, I'm a pro-European member of the Parliament. I fully believe that this passport must be European. We should avoid the possibility of having 27 vaccine passports in the European Union, and this could heavily damage again the sector and the tourism in demand for the coming season. It's absolutely important for the Balearic Islands as well for the UK tourism that we expect it to come as soon as possible to the islands. We hope that the passport will be signed for other countries. In fact, next week, 17th of the next week, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is going to present the project of the European certificate of vaccination. I think this common passport, recognized across the European Union, will have a very positive impact in restoring mobility and travel in all of Europe, as well as the third countries, and can be, of course, the United Kingdom. That internal borders of the European Union remain open. The passport must be absolutely voluntary and must not restrict the possibility of travel for those citizens who have not been vaccinated yet or because they don't want to be vaccinated. This is another possibility. The passport will allow mobility restrictions to be listed for those travelers who had the vaccine. And it will eliminate quarantines at origin or at destination. Will replace the obligation to carry out all tests. It's absolutely important because it will be very flexible, non-mandatory, absolutely voluntary, and it will be a possibility to restart tourism.
To be the best and most trusted place for news. I'm Michelle Clifford and I'm Sky's Europe correspondent.
Did you know that reducing pollution outside of school can help stop toxic air getting trapped in our classrooms?
Saturday will be another day of sunshine and blustery showers. The showers most frequent for western areas and for the north of England and Wales. It'll be cold and windy again with gales for many English and Welsh coasts, locally severe in the southwest. So once again, air pollution levels will be at a low level of 1 to 3 across the UK and Ireland as the weather remains windy with showers or longer spells of rain.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Let's take a look at what's making the headlines in today's papers now with the comedian Andrew Doyle and the journalist and broadcaster Vidisha. Welcome back to you both. Vidisha, starting off with this quite shocking and worrying story on the front of the Mail about an incident that's happened in the RAF.
Yes, and you'll see in a moment why there aren't any pictures on that front page. The Daily Mail has acquired video footage of a really violent and disturbing seeming initiation rite or hazing ritual that happened at the end of a training operation in the UK recently down to the RAF. And what the video appears to show is a naked young recruit being assaulted and possibly sexually assaulted by a drunken group of his peers. Now, of course, this incident is shocking and horrifying in itself because it points to sexual assault and violation and violence, but it also keys into a long-standing campaign run and led by defense chiefs who were very committed to saying to young army recruits and military recruits, look, this is not going to be a place where you will be assaulted or bullied or violated or subject to these hazing and initiation rituals. And they were very public about that and about acknowledging that there had been a history of such events and they wanted to stamp it out. So I do hope that this doesn't happen again and this is a wake-up call.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move on to the Times, Andrew, and this story about a possible increase in statutory sick pay.
Yes, so this is Matt Hancock has said that as we're coming out of lockdown, he's looking into the possibility of increasing statutory sick pay, which is currently £95.85 a week. This has actually been resisted, interestingly, by the Treasury. And what they're saying is that they're concerned that the cost to employers would be quite prohibitive, particularly at this moment when obviously we're coming out of the pandemic, out of the lockdown, and we need to get back on our feet in terms of the economy. Hancock has actually himself admitted that he wouldn't be able to live on the current rate of statutory sick pay because it only covers a quarter of the average weekly earnings. And actually, in terms of the developed world, we're actually one of the lowest rates of statutory sick pay for those countries that do have mandatory schemes. So this is something that does need to be addressed. And it looks to me as though this is actually something that has been a problem for quite a while. And it's one of those things that COVID has just brought to the fore, and it's forced people now to address it. And actually, Baroness Harding, who is the head of Test and Trace, has also pointed out that there is a risk that people are not going to self-isolate and they're not going to get tested if they fear that they might lose out on work. And because the statutory rate is so low, that isn't an incentive for people to get tested. So actually, this is an issue that affects absolutely everyone.
Yes, indeed. Onto this story, heartbreaking story in The Sun. This is the Girls Aloud star Sarah Harding telling her story, Badisha.
Heartbreaking, but also inspiring and very respect-worthy. So the Girls Aloud singer Sarah Harding has a new autobiography out called Hear Me Out, and it's been serialized in lots of places. She pointed out that she had been diagnosed with having breast cancer, and she underwent a mastectomy. She received treatment for that. She goes into a lot of detail about the rigors and the demands of the treatment in itself. It's not just that you simply get healed and you feel better afterwards. There's a recovery period. But she also points out that the doctors have found further things to be worried about. They don't know whether that's in her spine or in her brain. But the point she makes that I wanted to highlight today is that she had felt that there was a cyst in her body and she just thought it was benign because we were under pandemic. She wanted to be cautious, follow the rules. But actually, she's urging people that if you have pain, not to forget that even though we're under lockdown and pandemic, if there's cause for concern, the health service is still open and treating people. And we can't let those ailments and those potential fatalities and really serious illnesses mount up simply because we are being overcautious. Of course, that's a very, very good sentiment. But she points out that she delayed seeking treatment and delayed seeking diagnosis precisely because of an overcaution, even though her instincts were very rightly telling her something different. So absolutely best of luck to Sarah Harding. But what she says about her journey is really very valuable.
Yes.
It's valuable in telling people how to listen to their bodies.
Yes, and the NHS also urging people to come forward if they have other ailments aside from COVID. They're very much open for business as usual. To The Telegraph, Andrew, and tell us why smartphones could cause us to grind our teeth.
Yes, this is very concerning. This is a new study that has come out of Tel Aviv University in Israel, and they're claiming that there are, in fact, potential physical ramifications for using smartphones. Of course, we've all heard a lot about mental health issues. In fact, Facebook themselves admitted that it can be very bad for your mental health. And in fact, there was a study in 2019 of 6,000 children that found that those that use social media all the time are far more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression and that kind of thing. But this study from Tel Aviv actually looked at two different types of smartphone users. So one type of smartphone users is the regular smartphone user with all the apps and the various social access to social media. And the other type is what they call kosher smartphones. And the reason it's called a kosher smartphone is because members of the Orthodox Jewish community use this, and it blocks access to things like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and that kind of thing for the purpose of religious strictures. However, the study is showing that those who use the regular form of smartphone are 24% of those people experience what they call teeth grinding, as opposed to 26% who have the kosher version of the smartphones. And it's also associated with jaw ache and poor sleeping. And actually, this doesn't come as a surprise to me whatsoever. A few weeks ago, as an experiment, I just deleted Twitter off my phone, and I was just so much happier for the week and but just far better. And I only restricted its use to when I was at my laptop. So the moral of this story, get off Twitter. It's not good for you.
And other social media forms as well. Just very quickly, this story about MPs' expenses, but on a different scale, shall we say. This is in the Mirror, Badisha, very quickly.
This is going to make you grind your teeth even more. Skank of the Week award goes to Tory MP Royston Smith, who visited a lovely food bank serving people who need food to help their families. And he used his expenses and charged £1 for his parking expenses.
Yeah, you heard it right, just £1. Badisha and Andrew, see you in an hour's time. Thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast. We'll keep you up to date with all the very latest that you need to know.